Okay, we're going to take a really deep dive into how the double equals comparison, that's this thing, and how that works. Okay, first of all, it's the only comparison that allows for type coercion, unlike the triple equals. So here's the first rule. This is hard-coded. When you use double equals, undefined will always be true to null. Okay, that's just part of the specs. The second comparison, which we all know, is when you try to compare a string with a number. And the spec says, hey, if one of these is a number and the other one is a string, take the string and try your best to convert it to a numerical value. That's why we get true. That's also why when we do this, it's also true, right? Because when you try to coerce an empty string to a number, you get 0. Okay, now number 3, object versus object. And when I say object, you can do an empty array, an object itself, or even a function definition. Okay, right now I'll just do const obj1, and then I can do const obj2 is equal to obj1. Okay. Now, when you do, was it double equals or triple equals, and it's 2 objects, it will only return true if both of these objects, both of these variables are pointing to the same object in memory. Okay. So since we did obj2 equals to obj1, obj2 is also pointing to this. Now, if we just create another one, const obj3, and when we copy the value, you're going to see that obj3 won't be equal to obj2 because they are different arrays with the same values, right? But they live in different memory addresses. Okay, number 4 and 5, this would be the harder parts, I would say. So number 4 is when you're comparing any primitive except for Boolean versus an object. Okay, so let's compare 5 versus an empty array. We get false. When we compare 0 to an empty array, we get true. So why is that? Well, when JavaScript sees a comparison with a primitive and an object, first, it's going to try to call the value of for this object, right? So if we do dot value of, we just get an empty array. Now, when JavaScript sees that the return is an empty array and not a primitive, it will then stringify this. Okay, so then it's going to do 0 equal to string an empty array. And when you try to string an empty array, you get an empty string, right? So then JavaScript is doing, hey, is 0 double equals to an empty string? Which returns true because the spec says, hey, you're comparing a number to a string. I'm going to try to convert that string to a number. And when you coerce an empty string, you get 0. Okay, so all of those steps happened, and that's how we got true, right? Now, let me show you something else. Const ARR is equal to an empty array once again. But now I'm going to do ARR.value of. So I'm going to change the return value from an empty array to a primitive, which is a number of value 100. Okay. So now you do 100 double equals ARR. You're going to see that it's true because JavaScript is going to say, oh, hey, it's a primitive and an object. I'm going to check to see if the value of returns a primitive. In this case, it does. So it doesn't stringify it. It just uses this number. Cool, right? Okay, now the last one. When you do a Boolean comparison versus anything, let you do false. This is 10. How did we get false? Well, what it does is that it's going to convert your Boolean, right? And then it does the comparison, right? So you see that this is 0. So if we compare it to 0, we're actually going to get true, right? So even if you do false, this is an empty array. Why is this true? Well, that's because it sees that, oh, hey, it's a what? It's a Boolean, so it will try to convert false, and then it's going to get a 0. And then it's going to say that, oh, now it's going to be 0 versus an empty array, right? And then it's going to try to call the value of, which will not work. So then it will just stringify it, and then we get this. And then that double equal says, oh, hey, now we have string and number. So I'm going to try to compare that. And then we know that when we do this part on the right, we get, oops, let me change it back. We get a 0. So that's how we get true. Okay, that's it.